biggie that I really pounced on, and we were kind of touching on it yesterday, is the fact that, we now owe as a country more than the value of everything we have in this country. In other words, we are now worth less than the GDP of our country. We owe more than we have. We have not been in that phenomenon since World War II. And there you could argue there was, a world war. This is very, very different. So that backdrop is not encouraging. We're looking at a $3.8 trillion deficit, which used to be the budget for this entire country. That's why I'm so glad we have Mattie Duppler. She follows this stuff, the National Taxpayers Union, senior fellow. I'm sure she was checking it off her list. It confirms her worst fears and numbers that she's been focused on for years, before a lot of folks. And Mattie, that's a big one. That's something that goes beyond whatever day-to-day gyrations we see in the markets. What do you think?
You're right, Neil. Well, so we saw yesterday the Congressional Budget Office telling us that next year we'll reach GDP will get below the amount of debt that we're carrying as a country. That's extremely worrisome. But you made a comparison to World War II, right? This is where we look at the economy and we see what's happening in the United States domestic economy. And listen, we are in unprecedented times here. The fact that the government came in and shut down an economy, a labor landscape that looked the best it looked in 50 years, and now we're back to the contraction in the employment landscape, along the likes of where we were right before World War II. So you can ask, what's the role of government here? I think it makes sense that government has stepped in to try and spend and blunt the impact of what has happened because of coronavirus to the economy. The question is, what are those long-standing consequences, and what does that do to the national debt? I want to be careful here, because I do think the negotiations that are happening in Washington right now have shown really how far we've fallen when we've talking about fiscal scrutiny and sustainability. Right now, you've got Republicans and Democrats talking about we need to spend $1 trillion or $2 trillion or $3 trillion, throwing out numbers like they don't mean a darn thing, right, Neil? But here's the question.
Right.
Are policymakers asking what's the bang for our buck? Are taxpayers getting a return on the dollars they're investing on relief measures? That's what we need policymakers to be asking. And unless they ask that question, we are doomed to repeat this scenario over and over again where debt is overpowering our economy.
That was brilliantly put, and I've copied every word you said down, and later on my shows, I'm going to use that insight as my own. So I hope you don't take offense. But Mattie, one thing I think you're right, dead on right about, all kidding aside, is what's weird this time, that's always nerve-wracking when I say this time, is the markets like stimulus. The markets like the talk of still more stimulus down the pike, no matter its cost. And anytime that looks like it's in question or delayed or potentially denied or the McConnell stuff, they freak out. Now, I'm not saying it's justifiable. I'm saying we've come a long way from this laissez-faire view between the markets viewing government as just stand back. They don't like that when it's their heinies on the line and they like to be rescued. But the fact now, this is now the norm. The difference is we've always been spending, but now the markets embrace it and want to see more of it. They don't even care about paying it back. That's what rattles me.
But here's the deal, Neil. We need investors who have that level of sophistication when they're looking at what's happening in the stock market. I mean, today, really, by all accounts, is a NASDAQ-driven slide that's only bringing us back to where we were last week, because equities have been on such a tear thanks to stimulus from the Federal Reserve. This question of how detached the stock market has been from the real economy, I think, is a very good one. But when you look at what's happening today, this isn't a meltdown or a melt up. What it is really a recalibration of a stock market that's been completely detached from what's been happening on the ground level in the U.S. economy. And we've got a long way to go before we're back where we were in February, where the economy realistically and fundamentally was quite strong.
You know what I do think, though, Mattie, you're the expert, but as you know, I play one on TV, that I think if this deal
and you do it well,
apart,
Neil.
There we go. Thank you. But, that's actually, she's so good. I'll let that fly. But one of the things that I'm worried about is if we don't get a deal, $1.3 trillion, which I'm told is the cheap package, it's put off. This could punctuate, and get worse. And that's weird, because you can make a credible argument for not needing certainly as much stimulus right now, or now maybe following the markets, it becomes a front and center issue. What do you think?
I think that's absolutely right, Neil. The economy abhors a vacuum. And the question we have right now is that there's just so much uncertainty. There's policy uncertainty in what Congress is going to do. There's uncertainty about what's going to happen with coronavirus, whether or not it'll get worse in the winter. And of course, we're in election season. We've got 3 months until we could have a sea change when it comes to governance in Washington, D.C. Those 3 factors are pretty big ones that are weighing on the economy. Congress and the administration could step in to right this ship in some sense, just to give us a couple months of certainty, help businesses stay afloat as they continue to navigate what is a very uncertain time for businesses and very uneven across the country, right? We've got states that are in very different situations compared to different parts of the country. So we certainly need some kind of policy that steps in here that tries to salve some of those problems and some of those inconsistencies until we can see to the other side of this thing.
Thank you, Mattie. You're the best. I don't care how you put me down. You put me down so elegantly. I can take it. Mattie Duppler, the National Taxpayers Union Senior Fellow. She is a scary brainiac. All right. Right now, we're rifling through all of these.